Hello, and welcome to today's show, Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, international leadership expert and trusted advisor. Welcome to Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm delighted that you joined me today. I want to give a great big thank you and shout out to all of you listening today, all around the world. I'm delighted and so grateful that you joined me. I want to let you know that I've made a few changes to my show. The first change is that I want you to know a little bit more about me and that you can now find my podcasts under the heading of management on some of our listening platforms. That's right, management. So, if you're just finding me and tuning in for the very first time, I want you to know that I'm a leader and an entrepreneur. In fact, I have founded or co-founded not one, not two, but 3 successful businesses. Or maybe I should say 3 successful organizations, because 1 is a nonprofit and 2 are for-profit businesses. Yes, that's right. Now, before I became an entrepreneur, which was over 25 years ago now, I worked in corporate America for some really big companies like Xerox and Citibank. I also worked in higher education as an administrator and as a professor. As a matter of fact, I still do a little professing every now and then. I'm also a founding partner with the John Maxwell team, and I'm one of their faculty members as well, where I help all kinds of people leave their job, their job, and start their own business. I help speakers and coaches and trainers hone and polish their skills as well. So, if you're looking for a dynamic speaker to open or close an event, or if you need a caring and experienced coach or a trusted advisor or thought partner to help you with your business strategy or to develop the leaders in your organization, let's talk about how I can serve you and add value to you and your team. You can connect with me via LinkedIn or on Facebook. On LinkedIn, just look me up. I'm Dr. Gloria J. Burgess. Later in this show, I'll tell you how to easily find me on Facebook as well. Now, if you'd prefer to connect with me via email, use this email address. Just type in info, at gloriaburgess.com. All right? Great. So again, I'm delighted and so very grateful that you joined me today. I sure hope you're enjoying a fabulous day and that you're having a fantastic week. Because you know what? In the grand song of the universe, life is very, very short. It's short and sweet and very precious. So I hope you're making a difference in your own life. Because you know what? When you do, you also make a difference in someone else's life. Now, a lot of folks really want to make their life count for something, but they don't know how, or it just seems so big and overwhelming, they don't know how or where to begin. So they ask me, Dr. Gloria, how do you do that? How do you make your life count? Well, let me tell you, it's very simple, very, very simple. You make your life count day by day, step by step, smile by smile, every single day, 365, 24/7. You make your life count by making real connections with people. Now, don't get me wrong, social media is great for some things, but in your real everyday life, do you want followers, or do you want to be connected with real people? Do you want air friends, or do you want real friends you can actually talk with and be with? Can I just tell you something? When life throws you a curve, you want people who know you and love you. not just people who friend you and like you, right? I know you know what I'm talking about. I know that I'm talking to somebody out there, okay? Now, today I want to talk with you about leadership, about courageous leadership, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Specifically, we're going to focus on an approach to leadership, and this particular approach is called the Courage Way. The Courage Way, which is all about leading and living with integrity. And today's podcast focuses on a book that's called The Courage Way, Leading and Living with Integrity. How about that? The book was written by Shelly Francis, and she's joining me today as my very special guest. So, what exactly is the Courage Way? And what does it mean? And what does it take to lead and live with integrity? Well, Shelly will help us address those burning questions today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Shelly is a person of influence, and she's quite inspiring. Shelly is a leader who makes a difference in her own life and in the lives of so many others throughout the world through her work with the Center for Courage and Renewal, a nonprofit organization based in Seattle, Washington. In fact, she wrote the book, The Courage Way, in her role as the center's Director of Marketing and Communication. Before coming to the center, Shelly directed trademarking and publicity for a multimedia publisher called Sounds True. She's worked in diverse sectors including business, high-tech, healthcare, government, and publishing. She's also owned 2 small businesses. Shelly says the common thread throughout her career is bringing to light the best-kept secrets while bringing people together to facilitate collective impact and good work. I just love that. Now, I first met Shelly in her role at the Center for the Courage and Renewal. Years ago, I became familiar with the Center's work through my own work in leadership. And during the past dozen or so years, I was fortunate to become what I would call a friend of the Center. So, over the years, I've come to know a number of individuals there. When I heard about Shelly's book, I was absolutely delighted. And when I heard her speak about her book, she was positively on fire. So, to simply say that Shelly is interested in her work and book on leading and living with integrity would be an understatement. She is so passionate about her work, and I must say she is a woman with a mission. She's on purpose and on fire to change the world, and in particular to change the world for people who want to connect who they are with what they do. I think that includes most people on the planet. Now, when you hear her story, you will learn why Shelly is so passionate about making a difference, about changing and impacting the world in this way. I was struck by her passion. But this is just one of the many wonderful qualities that drew me, and I should say that draws so many people to Shelly and her work. Indeed, we are blessed to have her as one of our honored mentors on this show. She's an incredible leader, a writer, and storyteller, with a particular focus on serving other leaders. In many ways, in her outlook on life and in her work, Shelly pulls together the many threads of what my own life and work are all about. Now, you've heard me talk many, many times about these threads and themes on this show. The themes of gratitude, authenticity, generosity, courage, integrity, passion, presence, trustworthiness, hope, and possibility. I just love it. 2 women, Shelly and me, with very different backgrounds and experiences, and yet with so many common threads. Can I just tell you something? Shelly and I had a marvelous conversation. I'm so excited to have this amazing leader with us today. This is going to be a fabulous show. You don't want to miss a single minute of it. So, put on your walking shoes, grab your earbuds, or simply relax in your favorite chair. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea or a nice cool glass of water. We're going to have a great time. Before I jump into today's show, I want to take just a moment to welcome you. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Gloria, and this is Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining my show for the very first time. You're in for a real treat. I'm excited to have you listening in today, and I'm deeply honored that you've allowed me to be part of your day so you can be inspired by the ideas and resources to make your life count. Today's program is all about courageous leadership. Specifically, it is about leading and living with integrity. Hi, Shelly. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk with you today about your background and about your work. So welcome to the call.
Thank you, Gloria. I'm happy to be here with you.
Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about yourself so that my listeners can hear your voice, and then we'll talk about the wonderful work that you're doing with the Courage Way.
Sure. Well, my name is Shelly Francis, and I am the author of a new book called The Courage Way, Leading and Living with Integrity. And I wrote the book in my role as the Marketing and Communications Director for a nonprofit here in Seattle called the Center for Courage and Renewal. Before that, I worked for a multimedia publisher called Sounds True in Colorado. And I've worked in a range of businesses from publishing to government to high-tech and healthcare. I've even owned my own business twice. I like to say that the common thread throughout my career has been bringing to light best-kept secrets while bringing people together to do good work. I love writing books. I consider myself a writer and an artist, and just writing the Courage Way book.
Thank you, Shelly. So you've had quite a varied background, which to me is great soil for writing and the writing process. Can you tell us a little bit about the Courage Way, just some background information for people who may not be familiar with that language?
Sure. I wrote the book for the Center for Courage and Renewal as part of a strategic process, really, for us to figure out what is the impact that we'd had in the world. The Center for Courage and Renewal puts on retreats and programs for people to, as we like to say, connect who they are with what they do. It's professional and personal development where people can just embody courage and integrity in all that they do. And we do that with a set of practices called Touchstones and the Circle of Trust approach. It's really hard to describe what we do. It's one of those things where you almost just have to go try it. But we've really been trying to articulate what it is that happens in the lives of people after they've gone to a retreat. How do these practices show up in their life and leadership so that they can make a difference in the lives of other people?
Okay. Well, I'm sitting here, and your book is right in front of me. It's just a gorgeous cover. Can you tell me, Shelly, what did you learn about courage in your process of writing the book?
Man, I feel like I learned so many things that were surprising to me. And one of the first things that I learned even before we had completely landed on the book project popped off a shelf at me at a used bookstore, and it was a book called The Courage to Create by Rollo May, written way back in 1974. Mm-hmm. And he talks about 4 different kinds of courage, and I thought, I never thought about how many different kinds of courage there are. There's physical courage, which everybody, knows about, whether that's battling an illness or battling something, fighting for survival. And then the moral courage seems in a way so daunting, but I think that's what people talk about the most when they say the courage to lead or to really to stand up for your values. But he named 2 other types of courage that really resonated with me. And the first one of those was social courage. Remember, this was written in 74, but I think in the recent years, Brené Brown's been talking a lot about social courage, and that's the courage to be vulnerable and connect with other people, really wear your heart on your sleeve. And then the fourth one is creative courage, and I love that one so much because I feel like an artist, but I think there's an art to bringing ourselves to our lives and leadership authentically, and the idea of creating community or creating new ideas and new possibilities. So that's what I started looking for when I was writing the book, is what kinds of courage actually show up in people's lives.
And what did you find in that process, Shelly?
Well, I really noticed that courage shows up all the time. There's not some sequential way that you have to do one before you do the other. That courage is a shorthand for courage, or the root word is core, French or Latin, from about the heart. So it's when we lead from the heart or live from the heart or tap into who we are deep down in our heart, it seems like courage shows up. And courage is something we can cultivate, which was a surprise. And I learned that we have to cultivate trust to come up with courage.
Wow, it sounds like quite a learning journey for you. And I love just to hear you talk about courage. It intersects a lot with the work that I do as well. So can you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned practices in the book, and for some of our listeners, they may have a little faint glimmer of what you're talking about, but can you say more about some of the practices and how they might relate to building up your courage?
Sure. The Circle of Trust approach is a set of guidelines that were created by the Center for Courage and Renewal and by our founder, Parker Palmer. And these are really guidelines or ground rules for holding conversations. But I also learned that you can use these same ideas for how you interact with people just every day and in your life. So these touchstones, if you think about a circle of rocks that you could place in a circle to create a space for exploring your life and exploring your ideas. We're really just talking about how do I reflect on where I am in my life so that I can become more self-aware. And when we do that with other people, when we're practicing with other people who are abiding by the same ground rules, we create the safe space where we know we're not going to be judged, where we're really there just to support each other's growth. So these touchstones, there's 3 of them especially that I really love, that I noticed show up in the lives of leaders and in the circle. And they're, kind of poetic guidelines, which I think is also fun. The first one is called When the Going Gets Rough, Turn to Wonder. And this is sort of a ground rule for how do we stay curious? How do we not go into a mental argument while we're talking with somebody or start judging someone, but just wonder if the conversation starts to get sticky, like, I wonder what's making this person react in a certain way, or I wonder what it is in their life that's causing some discontent right now or some kind of a reaction. But then another question is, I wonder what my reaction teaches me about myself. So it really lets us set aside judgment to listen to each other. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking about, a lot of my work is with leaders and leaders in all kinds of contexts and different ages. And I was just with a group of young people yesterday at one of our local high schools, and what was on their minds was equity and inclusion, and how do you have conversations that are difficult conversations to have with your peers about things that divide us. And that touchstone, turning to wonder, came to mind. And yes, so it makes perfect sense to me, Shelly.
Yeah, and I think just that turning to wonder almost gives you this visual idea, too, of letting wonder and curiosity be in the room with you. And I like to have metaphors that helps me learn, and when I can visualize that helps. Another really fun practice for me is one called no fixing, saving, advising, or correcting each other. And that one, the leaders who I've interviewed have said that one has changed the way they bring themselves to work so much, because as leaders, we're expected to always have the answer. Even as friends and mothers and siblings, we think we're helping each other when we like to give advice. but it can be so countercultural and liberating even to feel like I don't need to give this person advice. What I can do is help them tap into their own inner wisdom, and what a gift that is to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned that there are 3 touchstones that you like to talk about. We talked about turning to wonder and no fixing and saving and that. Is there another one that you'd like to talk about as well?
Yes, because the first 2 really need to be paired with this third one, which is the practice of asking open, honest questions. And these are kind of questions that you couldn't possibly know the answer to. They're questions that help, again, tap into a person's inner knowing. We're helping somebody else tap into their inner resources. So what's a question that I could ask you that would generate more reflection and insight?
So that's a way, it sounds like, of also paying attention and listening. I find in my own work as a coach and as a consultant that people are really busy. Instead of listening to you, they are busy thinking about what their response is going to be. And so when they answer a question, it may not even be the question you asked. So that asking open, honest questions, I think, just for me, it helps people just stay grounded and present and listen more closely and deeply.
Exactly. And I think being present is, it's another touchstone as well. Be present as fully as possible. And when we can do that and recognize that we're all here with the rest of our life going on in the background, but when we can bring ourselves to that other conversation just fully in the moment, it takes practice, but it also creates more space for that deep kind of listening.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to ask you a question about your writing process. You talked about being a writer. You talked about the joy of writing. I can hear that in your voice as you talk about your book and being an artist. Can you just tell us a little bit, Shelly, about your process in creating the book, and also talk a little bit about your journey with the book thus far?
Well, I do love writing books, and I think it's just part of who I am. I can remember writing books and illustrating my own books in 2nd grade. So I think writing books is just part of how I process life, process questions. Part of the process of this one was another favorite thing that I get to do is talking with other people, and I interviewed over 120 people for this book.
Oh my.
And so, my background is in journalism, and so asking questions to get to the story beneath it is something I really love to do. And then I love to weave together then the big ideas that go with the stories. An important part of my writing practice, though, is not just the interviewing, but it's writing by hand, doing my first drafts with a pen and paper in my journal, which I guess for me it feels like I'm tapping into another part of my brain, but I also feel like I'm having a conversation with myself that I can explore. I call them my case study days. In the midst of writing the book, I had my day job, so I was asking myself on especially hard days, okay, what of these ideas that I'm writing about could I apply at work in this moment, as a way to test whether they really held water. And I was pleased to find that they did.
Wow, that's amazing that you interviewed so many people. Can you tell us a little bit about the 120 and like what were the big themes that drew you to these particular individuals? What were you looking for?
Well, for this book, I was trying to hone in on how people are working in organizations or working in community to change not just their personal life, but the way that they work with other people, and if that shifts the way that their organizations can serve their purpose or their mission. And so I started by talking to a lot of courage and renewal facilitators, many of whom are in the business world, and asking them also to connect me with people who had been through courage and renewal retreats. And I was looking for people who had been through more than one program to see if there was a shift over time in how deeply these practices showed up in people's lives. And a group down in California called the Courage to Lead for Nonprofit Leaders, I was able to travel there and saw and interviewed about 9 leaders plus a group, and they have this cumulative community where they've gone through retreats and then become part of an ongoing community. And I really saw the span of courage that can happen over time. I mean, some of them had been practicing for 10 years, but that sense of going from physical courage to collaborating together seemed to show up. One of the things that I feel like I saw from the stories is that it really is true that when people tap into who they are deep inside and lead from that place rather than leading from who they think other people expect them to be, they're tapping into their gifts. They're tapping also into what their values are and what brings them meaning. That there's something that seems like it clicks into place, and suddenly their organization seems to take off in a stronger way as well. So that was affirming and surprising almost at the same time.
Wow. As I listen to you talk, you're making more transparent, if you will, the kind of work that I do and love to do. And I don't think about it in the same language necessarily, but it's just fascinating to hear you talk about this. And I want to just ask you another question. You've used the term Center for Courage and Renewal several times. That's obviously a place where you work. Could you tell our listeners what that means so that they get a little bit more robust idea of what that center does and what the word Center for Courage and Renewal actually mean for you?
Sure. Well, we are both a small nonprofit organization, a 501c3. That means we're tackling problems that don't have an instant answer, but our primary product is to train facilitators who can then use this social technology called the Circle of Trust approach in their lives and in their work. So in a way, we say it's about the content and the books and the ideas. We're providing resources for people through our website, but our facilitators are really the ones who create the programs then that people can attend, whether that's through coaching or through organizational consulting or weekend retreats where people have time and space to get away from work. The idea of courage and renewal, though, is also, we would say, a social movement because it's about social justice ideas. It's about renewal not only of your own energy and commitment and passion for the work that you do, but that when people tap into that, there seems to be a renewal of energy and a renewal of the organizations and institutions they work in. So we sort of measure courage on this spectrum of renewal from the personal to the collective. Does that make sense? It's one of the hardest things to describe.
Yeah, it is, and thank you for saying that. I was actually thinking about the spectrum of individual to collective work, and that the work begins perhaps with the individual in terms of the courage work, but how that can spread within the practice as well as how you take it out and apply it in the organizations, communities, whatever arena of practice you happen to be involved in. So it makes very good sense to me. Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm going to go back to a question that I asked you before. I kind of knitted two questions together, but I would like to hear a little bit more about this one, and that is the building up of courage. We talk a lot about courageousness in our culture, and braveness and boldness and daring and all of that, but a lot of people, I'm going to say, they kind of back away from that. I know when I wrote a book about 10 years ago called Dare to Wear Your Soul on the Outside, people would say, oh my goodness, doesn't that hurt? And what I would say to them is the alternative hurts a whole lot more when you don't step up and when you keep your voice tamped down. And so can you talk to us a little bit more, Shelly, about what does it take to build up your courage, especially in today's world?
Well, I love that you said voice just now, because I think another thing I learned in this book is the concept of voice and agency feels like code word for courage. And we are starting to see more voice and agency. I mean, just think about the young teenagers from Parkland who had the horrible shooting happen. But rather than become victims or look to other people to help save them, they banded together and found their voices and actually started shifting a conversation that went not only national but but global. And we have to think of how do we sustain that kind of amazing courage to speak up. And I think there's some clues in what we see in movements like that I want to name. If we had a camera going on and I had a pen, I would take a pen and write these things on my 5 fingers, because I feel like I'm thinking of them as my courage quintessentials. These are the 5 things I think it boils down to and how we create our courage. And the first one that I would write on my index finger would be true self. And by true self, I mean, how do we tap into that inner wisdom, that best part of ourselves in our heart, the person, the soul or the spirit of who we are. We might change as human beings, but there's still some essence of ourself that is our deepest wisdom. And courage, I think, is when we meet that true self. Those moments of courage that come out of the blue, maybe the physical courage or that sense of that thing, I can't not do this, I just have to do it. I think that's when we're meeting our soul. I think that's when our soul shows up. The second piece that I think it takes to create courage is trust. And the most important thing, so this is, I'd be writing this on my middle finger, is we got to trust that true self. We have to learn how to trust our inner wisdom and our inner knowing. But the third one is that we need, on my finger I would write community. And by community, I mean we need to be able to trust in other people and build trust up. And when we have other people who can help support our growth as people, then we have a sense of we're in it together. I'm not alone. We can overcome isolation if we can have even one person. I mean, by community, I don't necessarily mean the neighborhood you live in or a large group of people. Community can be one other person who loves me enough and who I love enough to help each other grow. Those are the 3 main things that it takes to start growing your courage. But it also takes 2 key practices. And on my pinky, I would write the word paradox. And it's funny to think about paradox as a practice, but I really discovered this in writing the book, is that the leaders I interviewed had a capacity to overcome that sense of either or, black and white, polarized tensions. And they had a way of seeing it as a both and. There's a concept called the Mobius strip, the piece of paper that if you flatten it out, there's one side and the other side, and those seem very separate. Yeah. But then when you bring the ends together, you have a circle. And there's nothing wrong with the circle. You can circle your wagons and take time to be in the middle and just center yourself. But your outside life is always outside that boundary. So if you take the ends of that paper and you twist it and you stick those ends together, you would run your finger around that piece of paper and discover that it's all one side. It's all one surface, and that's called the Mobius strip. It's just sort of a magical geometric shape. But it represents the concept of paradox, that life isn't just both and. I mean, life is life and death, love and loss, night and day, breathing in and breathing out. All of that is paradox. So if we can recognize that paradox is there, how can we, rather than feel polarized, look for ways to let one thing inform the other, but not feel like it has to be either or?
And that's so important these days, and I'm going to say especially in Western culture, Shelly, because we tend to put things into categories and into silos, and it's either this or that. People don't see that it can be both possibilities, and I'm going to say, and then some.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly, and I think that's what creative courage is about, is the idea to move beyond our limited command and control or our fear-based understanding and make more space by adding some extra dimension, pausing long enough to reflect and say, oh, there must be another way. What could that be?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. And you mentioned 5 fingers, so what's the 5th one?
So on my thumb, and I joke about I would do this with my thumb because what makes us human is our opposable thumbs, but I would also write the word reflection on my thumb and use my thumb to point to each of those 4 fingers and reflect on true self and reflect on trust. What am I trusting or not trusting in this moment? I would reflect on community and say, where are my people? or how could I build community or find other people to help me in a rough spot. And then I would use my pinky, thumb to pinky and say, where's the paradox? Where can I be looking for paradox right now? And then when I do that, I put both my hands together, or I even have another person who's thinking of those same 5 ideas. Put your hands together in a cup, and you can hold more complexity, or you can hold more challenge, or you can just hold each other long enough to recover and renew yourself and find your courage.
Oh, I love that, and I love the metaphor that you used of the hand. So thank you for walking through that. It's, I think, going to be very helpful to people to understand the steps, if you will, the stepping stones, and ways in which to make courage more applicable in our daily life, and how to go about doing it. I mean, it's a pretty complex thing. So I thank you for breaking that down, Shelly. Fantastic nuggets. Thanks again to Shelly Francis for being my guest today. If you'd like to learn more about Shelly's book, which is called The Courage Way, Leading and Living with Integrity, check it out at courageway.org. That's courageway.org. COURAGEWAY.org. You can also sign up for a free introductory email series about the book. And you can sign up for the series on the same site. Again, that's courageway.org. If you want to explore additional resources about Shelly's book or about the Center for Courage and Renewal, please go to this site. That's www.couragerenewal.org. www.couragerenewal.org. That's Courage Renewal, all smushed together. There's no and sign in it, okay? Or and word. Just Courage Renewal, COURAGERENEWAL.org. And if you missed any part of this week's show about courageous leadership, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, or you can catch us on Alexa or right here on Talk Network Radio. Now, before I close today's show, I just want to give a shout out to all the folks listening all around the world. Let me tell you something. Now more than ever, the world needs you. We need your voice. And I want to encourage you to bring it. Because if you don't, we will miss out on what you have to offer. We will miss out on your very special gifts that only you can bring and share with the world. You know, it's truly amazing how much impact one person can have when you lift your voice for what you care about, and especially when you do so with courage, with compassion, generosity, and integrity, and when you respect the birthright dignity of yourself and others. Now, I also want to encourage you to share the wealth. If you enjoy listening to my podcast, that's Legacy Living with Dr. Gloria Burgess, tell somebody. That's how you can help me pass it on. That's how we spread the love. That's how we can make a difference, one person at a time, one family at a time, one team at a time, one classroom at a time, inch by inch, mile by mile, and smile by smile, at home, at work, and in any area of our lives, every single day, 365, 24/7. Now remember this, how you live is how you show up. How you live is how you lead, right? And when we show up for ourselves and other people, that's called leadership. So remember this again, how you live is how you lead. Now, if you missed last week's show or any part of this week's show, you can listen to the recording at your convenience. You can even listen to it on the go. Check it out at iTunes, Audible, Alexa, SoundCloud, iHeart, TuneIn. Spreaker.com, Talk Network Radio, and so many other places. Or you can tune in right here at www.talknetworkradio.com/hosts/legacy living. That's talknetworkradio.com/hosts/legacy living. Okay? All right. Now, before I close today's show, I want to thank each of you for tuning in, for allowing me to share a bit about my journey with what legacy living is all about. Not just living and learning, but living and learning and serving so that you make a difference in your own life and in the lives of others. It's about being on purpose every single day, 365, 24/7. Legacy living is a powerful way to make your life count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. Please join me again next time, right here, for another segment of Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. Don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Have a fantastic day, and remember, make the days in your life count. God bless you. That's our show today. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. I hope you'll join me again next time. Until then, don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Here's to you. Have a fantastic day, and be sure to make it a yes kind of day. Remember to celebrate the music of your life. Make the days in your life count.